and was new faculty there. And we connected, and Ellen introduced herself, and she said, "I'm a paleontologist." And my brain exploded because I didn't ever know I would meet one in real life. And it was someone who was my age, who was super fun and cool. And I just thought everybody like me wanted to be a paleontologist until the age of 9, and then quit, and then did real world things. And so Ellen was doing fantastic research in Ethiopia, and I would just be so excited every time she got back from her field work. And I would just ask her all about it. And she was just, a superhero in my mind. And in real life, like she existed, and I could reach out and touch her. And I was working in film production, and as far as I was concerned, Ellen's on a tenure track job. She's getting lots of funding. She's, meeting with amazing grad students. She's doing incredible field work. As far as I'm concerned, mission accomplished. And I had come off a very difficult film shoot that day. And film production, like paleontology, is very male-centered. And I had just had some really negative comments, just purely based on my appearance and judgments about what I could do as a female. And Ellen and I went out to dinner that night, and I was confiding in her and just complaining and just like, "This is so awful. I just want to show up to work and just do my job without everybody negating what I have to say or ignoring me or thinking that I can't, pull my weight." And then Ellen just looked at me point blank and said, "I feel the same way about my job." And that just broke my heart. So Ellen, I'll kick it off to you now.
Yeah, and I actually oh no, I'm not gonna leave the meeting. I'm trying to share my screen. Because I'll share a few visuals. There we go. Okay. Okay. Great. And then if I put this in slideshow mode, then you don't have to look at other things. There we go. Okay, so yeah, so as Lexi said, paleontology is a very male-dominated field, especially the going out in the field part of it. And so this was my first field experience, and so this is me right here. And at first it was kind of cool, like, oh, I'm the only woman here. That's okay. I can still do this. And then I just started realizing that I was going on more and more of these trips. And this top one, this is Ethiopia, like Lexi talked about. Um, and very often the only woman on the team at the field site or in the room, in the lab, in the faculty meeting, et cetera, et cetera. And so here is what the University of Wyoming looks like. And so this top graph right here, this is when I started at Wyoming in 2014. And I realized as I was giving this talk, 2014 is kind of a long time ago. I wonder how things have changed. So last year, I put unofficial data together. So the top chart is official university data. The bottom chart is me trying to just like go to the different department web pages and look at photos and take my best guess. But so the EAR, that's the earth sciences. And so there's what our faculty looked like 10 years ago. And you can see our faculty today. Things really haven't changed that much. We keep saying like, oh, if we just give it enough time, women will start coming through the ranks, things will get better. We've been saying that since 1970 about. And then even going beyond like the academic setting and the university setting, if you just Google paleontologist, for a long time, this was the kind of results you would get. You would get a bunch of guys digging up dinosaurs. But I will say this photo right here of the woman in the yellow hard hat, that's my photo. of a dear friend of mine who was one of our bearded ladies. That's Dr. Kelly Trujillo. Um, and then sometimes it even feels like at a fictional level, we can't imagine women in science. And so this slide right here, this is where we were when we were starting the Bearded Lady project. And so if you looked at on screen who was being portrayed as a scientist, in 2014, it was 7-1 men to women. And that number, I went back to the Gina Davis Institute before this. And they updated this, I think, 2 years ago, and it has actually gotten a lot better. It's down to 3-1. However, most of those gains have been made in medical TV shows. And so if you were to look at, say, computer scientists or physicists or potentially paleontologists, I don't know if there have been any fictional paleontologists recently outside of the Jurassic franchise. But those physical sciences are still quite biased toward having men shown on screen. Um, and I'll just say like two more things and then we'll go to the film. And so there's been a lot of academic work done on why aren't there more women in science? How do we get more women in science? And this was a really foundational study. I remember sitting in my office. This was back when I was with Lexi in Ohio. She wasn't in my office with me, but I remember I was sitting in my office and I opened up this paper and my jaw just absolutely dropped. So these social scientists had done a study where they sent resumes to a bunch of scientists who run their own labs, either in a university setting or potentially in an industry setting. And these resumes, so people got either a resume that said John on the top or that said Jennifer on the top. And these were middle of the road applicants. They weren't superstars, they weren't disasters. And across the board, scientists rated John as being more competent. They said they'd be more likely to hire him and they would be more willing to give him mentorship. And it was both male and female scientists who were preferentially or who were giving higher ratings to a John resume versus a Jennifer resume. And so obviously that's not a good thing, and that tells us that we have these unconscious biases about who a scientist is, what a scientist looks like, and then because of who we're seeing as scientists, and I showed you that, we're thinking that's the sort of person who could be a scientist. Okay, so I think maybe I will stop there. Oh, and one more thing. There was a very similar study done, but in this case, it wasn't just science. It was a more general employability. And they had the names Emily and Greg versus Lakeisha and Jamal. And so now in this case, Emily and Greg were more likely to be interviewed and hired than Lakeisha and Greg. Um, so I just wanted to point that out as well. So Bronwyn, are we ready with the film?
We are ready. We're ready to
Okay,
go.
great.
And yes, and for somebody, I was in science as well, and all of my classes, I was in environmental science in the early 90s, and all men in the classes. They come in from hunting and get into our soil, spitting tobacco, and coming from hunting and come into class. So it was very interesting. I'm glad to see some things are changing, albeit not as fast as we'd like.
Well, and I will say now, well, and since I was in grad school, the student populations are more balanced in the geosciences. Since the early 2000s, we've had pretty equal numbers of men and women in our geology classes. But that's not who you're seeing as your professors.
Gotcha. Well, that's good. Good. All right. Well, let's watch the film and then we'll discuss afterwards. All right. Everybody can mute themselves and we'll put the film on. Thank you.
Bronwyn, I think you might need to approve unmuting it or making the audio public. Usually there's an option. Usually there's an option in share screen to share audio as well.
Okay, I'm looking. Science magazine, you flip on.
I think it would be on Zoom rather than the Vimeo when you share your screen.
And their technology show. Look. All right, I'm looking on Zoom here and I'm not, let's see. Oh, here we go. Share computer sound, sorry. There we go.
Most of the time what you're gonna see is somebody who's pretty large, pretty scruffy looking, pretty dirty, and totally male. And that's not me. My name is Ellen Currano, and I'm a paleontologist at the University of Wyoming. Paleontologists study fossils, which are the remains of plants and animals that lived at different points during Earth's history. A lot of people think that paleontologists only study dinosaurs, and I have told people, and not just 5-year-olds, adults, that I don't study dinosaurs, and then I totally lose the coolness factor. But paleobotany is really, really neat. So paleo, old, botany, plants. I study old dead plants. And I'm a terrible gardener, so that's why they're old and dead. Plants are a really fascinating thing to study because it's the base of Earth's ecosystem. Everything else relies on plants to live. I teach an introductory paleontology class, and to try to make it not just, this abstract science course, I like to talk a little bit about the people who are doing the research. A lot of museums, a lot of paleontology textbooks have, these very classic black and white pictures of some of the great paleontologists. I got a month through the semester and realized I have only showed pictures of old white bearded men. This is really sad. For whatever reason, and it's obviously a complicated problem, you go from having about a 50-50 split of men to women at the undergrad level, but then by the time you get to faculty, it's only 16% of US geological faculty are women. And lots of them have the same struggles that I do. A lot of them, have been out in the field and it's one woman and 12 guys. But there's no reason physically, chemically, why women can't be good at science and can't be paleontologists. I just started getting really frustrated about thinking people weren't taking me seriously in my field because I was female or because I was young or whatever. And just never being around people who look like me. And I had this little crisis of, I feel like I'm alone out there. After a kind of tough day at work, I sat down and had dinner with a really good friend of mine, Lexi Marsh, and we were talking about some of the struggles that we've faced and our fears of not being taken seriously because of the way we looked. And I don't remember who made the comment anymore, but one of us said, oh, well, if you just put a beard on, then you wouldn't have this problem anymore. And then we finished dinner, we went our separate ways. I went to bed. I woke up the next morning and saw Lexi had written me an email at about 2 in the morning saying, what if we actually did this? Frankly, there just aren't a lot of photographs of female paleontologists. Through the Bearded Lady Project, we're getting a chance to have photographs of women showing this is something anyone can do. So let's bring in our friend Kesley, who's a fine arts photographer, and she can make these incredible portraits of women in their element, but wearing beards. This is amazing. I'm so glad we're doing this.
Well, I actually found out about the Bearded Lady Project through Ellen. I was asked to review one of her grant proposals in which I was already very interested and impressed by her research, but it was reading about the Bearded Lady Project there that I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? Because I was very interested in the ways in which she was creating these quirky, but at the same time very substantive portraits of women doing paleontological work, especially in the field, and I thought that is wonderful. So when I next saw Ellen, I told her that I thought that it was a great project and that she was doing some really good things for the field as a whole. And she asked me if I'd be interested in being part of the project, and I said yes. And I said, right now I'm doing work in the Mojave with a team of women. So I said, this might be a great opportunity.
We have planned a traveling exhibition. We're going to start off to coincide with the Geological Society of America annual meeting. So many people today are visual learners. Having these photos to come back to, I think, is going to be really important.
My initial reaction to the Bearded Lady Project was this: wow, that is so brave. Because to be very out there, the Bearded Lady Project puts Ellen, who, doesn't yet have tenure. She will have tenure, I have no doubt whatsoever. But this started a few years ago when she was first writing the proposal, and I felt that was really brave.
I didn't know how people would respond. And actually, it was unbelievable. A colleague from Berkeley, which is a top 5 paleo school, invited our crew out and recruited 27 PhD scientists and students to don beards for our cause. One of those scientists said, "Can I bring my own mustache?" Well, of course. So it turns out that mustache was what she wore in the Australian outback in the 1970s so she wouldn't get harassed while doing her field work.
I have tried to look like a guy when I've been alone in the field in Australia, simply not to stand out. It was part of being in a remote area where I was camping alone. I had to go into town and buy food, and I didn't want to look like a new woman in town, especially in remote places where there were a lot of guys. Professionally, not wanting to stand out, it was being the only woman often with a bunch of guys I didn't want to be excluded from what was going on as someone different. The way that people have asked me about being a woman in paleontology in the past has usually been something I've wanted to avoid. I have felt that for my male graduate students, I have been a role model as a scientist that tells them that there is no difference in the way you do science. I have always said I am a woman and I am a scientist, but I am not a woman scientist.
I think a lot of people in geology, if you're a woman, then you need to be a tomboy. And I'm not a tomboy as such. It doesn't mean that I don't want to get dirty, that I don't want to go out into the field. I want to do all of those things, but I don't necessarily want to always wear my walking boots to work. Particularly from my perspective, I wanted to be involved because I thought it was important to show not only the diversity of paleontology, but also the diversity of people or females that do paleontology. It's okay to be a tomboy, it's okay not to be a tomboy. It doesn't change your brain power at all. And getting people to accept that has been really hard. And I felt that I did have a hard time with that early on in my career.
There might be people who think to themselves, oh, for goodness sakes, I'm tired of hearing about women in science. Or they might think to themselves, why are all you women running around with beards on? What is the point of that? I don't get it. Or there might be people who would say, and I think some few older people would say, well, there is no problem.
It's not that there are necessarily really clear barriers to success for women. There are plenty of successful women, but some of those barriers do still exist. And in this landscape, how do we think about supporting women scientists, supporting women students making their way into their profession? What women face now is not necessarily what women faced 50 years ago.
I think in some ways it may actually be worse because it's insidious. People don't even realize the judgments that they are making.
Why do we have to put on beards to make a statement about the fact that there are many competent and innovative women paleontologists doing very important science?
I feel like I have to alter how I speak and how I do things. And that takes a lot of work. You know, if you want to turn up to be like the kind of business power person, you've almost got to rehearse that. You've got to school yourself in it. And you can do it sometimes, and then other times you can't do it. Then you feel like, well, what's the real me? And you get a bit conflicted by that, I think.
It's so deeply ingrained in us, all of us, like me included, right? These societal roles that we have, it's totally ingrained. I know, like, I had to work on being able to push back and actually to disagree with somebody and not being seen as being, hysterical. That's a word that one often hears. My voice can't be raised. It can't be high-pitched. I always have to speak in a very even tone because otherwise I'll just be disregarded immediately as the hysterical female who doesn't know what she's doing. It's only been in the last few years where I actually felt comfortable enough in my confidence as a scientist that I don't care, that I can be a woman and be a scientist at the same time.
Developing confidence in my abilities as a scientist has been a process. And sometimes it still goes on. But over time, having that lack of self-confidence initially and building that up until there's a core inside me of confidence. It sometimes is hidden and I have to find it, but it's in there. A paleontologist, a scientist doesn't have to be a man, doesn't have to be a Caucasian. We can be any color, we can be any sex, any flavor, and still be successful. And I think that is a lesson that all of us are learning in society. It does make me feel good when I hear from young girls who may be of color, that they see me and they think, oh, you are enlarging my
my perspectives of what a scientist can actually be. I was a little surprised about the beard thing, but I'm game.
The fact that there are so many women who have been willing to put on beards and to look frankly ridiculous wearing said beards speaks to what kind of women are out there, that we're not people who take ourselves too seriously. We're people who are very passionate about what we do, and we are willing to look ridiculous in order to fight for something that we believe in.
Switch Jessica and Lisa.
Okay. That'd be good.
Good?
I think it speaks to the power of this project that it's not just my friends who did this. To get all these people shows how meaningful it is to a lot of women out there.
The thing that struck me when I first started seeing the pictures was male beards on female bodies. And I am not a man if you put a beard on me, right? I am a woman, and I think that I want to celebrate the differences between male and female paleontologists at the same time as we strive for equality and equity between male and female paleontologists. And I think that now I understand more that the point of showing women with beards is to create that feeling of discomfort and to lead to revelations like the one that I had. It made me uncomfortable because I don't want to be a man. I don't want to be treated like a man. I want to be treated like myself. And who I am is a paleontologist who is also a woman and who loves being both.
I think the most important thing is just to be having the conversation. I don't know that we're gonna necessarily come up with any perfect solutions for how to conquer a very challenging topic, but I think having the conversation is an important one. I think showing other junior women that there is a group of women that have had experiences in the field that you can talk to, that you can have conversations with, knowing that there are people that have gone before you and experienced some of these things. I would think that your exhibition at GSA would be really powerful for them, and that makes me really happy.
I first properly got into geology back when I was at college, and I had a really young and really fun teacher, and she's the reason I went on to study geology at university actually. I just got in contact with her because I was feeling really inspired. I haven't heard from her for like 13 years. Yeah, she said she was really touched to hear from me after all this time. She still remembered me, and she was really glad that I stayed in geology, and she said she'd had a really tough year and it really made her day hearing from me. So it's really nice to hear, and I think we should all be telling these people that inspire us that they do inspire us, because maybe they don't even realize it.
The great thing about the Bearded Lady Project is that it's created a community of women who are participating in the project, talking about the project, interacting with it, and we are sharing our stories. And I think the more you share your stories, the more normalized your experiences are, and you think to yourself, oh, it's not me. You know, sometimes it is, right? It's not like we can erase all of our faults with implicit bias, but there are situations in which there are things happening because of the way people are socialized, because of the structure of our society, that don't have to do with our intelligence or how hard we work. And I think that acknowledging that and embracing that and talking about it with other women has really helped me feel like a better scientist and like a more confident person.
It's not only a project that gets a lot of play in being, you know, shown in different venues, but it's almost like a historic piece of combined art and culture and science and education that it will kind of stand as an archive in itself, I think.
You know, I don't think I anticipated how much time this would take and how much it might take away from the other parts of my job. And I remember I was at a conference last year, and one of my committee members came up to me and he said, you know, I love what you're doing and it's super important, but don't stop doing science. And I was like, well, I don't intend to stop doing science. That's why I got into this in the first place. But I understand why he said that, in that this could become a major part of my job, and it could keep me from publishing scientific articles, from doing the science, from moving forward in my career. You know, I realize that I have chosen to do all these things. People will associate me with the Bearded Lady Project, with the issue of women in science. But at least in terms of the scientific community, that's not the only thing I want to be known for. I want to also be known for the research that I'm doing, the teaching that I'm doing, the contributions that I'm making to the paleontological community. People need to see that anyone can be a scientist.
Why wouldn't a woman make a good paleontologist?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, let's see.
And if I can just, I have 2 minutes of some pictures of the what's happened since kind of thing, and then maybe we can just open it up for questions and discussion. Okay, so let me do this again. And now we're switching over to this one. Oops, that's okay. So I put in the chat, but also up here on the slide is the website where you can find this film. Lexi also cut a 52-minute TV hour version, which was on Cincinnati PBS. So if you want to hear from more women and more stories of how folks got into paleontology, that really comes out nicely in the longer version. And so just a couple pictures. This up here, that's our little geology museum here at the University of Wyoming. That was our first showing of the traveling portrait exhibition. One of my favorite things to do is to get to show this film to giant rooms full of, these are middle and high school girls from Wyoming. So we had a great day showing the film and chatting about being a scientist. And then this photo over here, this is Virginia Tech brought me out, and we did a showing of the film and a panel with local scientists, and they rented out their old movie theater, and it was really cool. And we were on the billboard with Spike Lee's movie, so major achievement for Lexi and Spike Lee. And then we had the exhibition went to, I don't know, 5, 10 venues. Our biggest, and maybe some of you made it down to the Smithsonian, the Natural History Museum. Kay Behrensmeyer was one of our bearded ladies, and so she helped us get the exhibition in there, and they did just a beautiful, beautiful haul. And then this other photo here, that is our final exhibition at the Museum of the Rockies up in Montana, and that was 2 years ago now. And I don't have any pretty pictures to share, but we have we had a scholarship fund that all our donations and proceeds went to, and we gave out over $10,000 in student grants to, I think all of them were graduate students who were doing some kind of paleontology work.
Thank you for that. And was it that this is what a scientist looks like? Was that anything to do with the If-Then project? Okay.
That was at the Museum of the Rockies, yeah.
Yeah, we got a small grant from them and put the pictures inside of our small museum, and we'd have people come in and go, "What are all these women doing in the museum?" I said, "Well, I'm glad you asked. I'll happy to tell you." Let's open it up for some questions. You can raise your hand with the icon, or put your question in the chat box. I think Angela put something in the chat box here. Did y'all see this question? I think the beards do a very good job of illustrating the ridiculousness of not taking seriously the opinion of women paleontologists. It says to me here, would you take me seriously if I had a beard? And that's clever. However, I'm confused. Seeing a bearded woman might be shocking to people. Maybe it's different in life experience, but it's not infrequent for women to have noticeable facial hair.
Yeah, I think Angela not only brilliantly condensed our abstract, which tends to go over a lot of people's heads, is this is a very camp approach to challenging gender stereotypes. When we were brainstorming early on, we decided fairly quickly we didn't want to dress our subjects up like men, that the beard, and anybody could choose their style. So once we started accumulating more subjects, people got very specific about the kind of beard they wanted. But within the portraits, we wanted that to be very specific to the subject. So so it's always photographed either in their lab or the field site. They picked the location, they picked the tools that would be featured. So we have someone who really wanted to highlight her army tags that she got from working in the Arctic. We also have somebody who wanted to, bring a specific hammer. So this is very much a personal thing. And, we wanted it to challenge the assumption of, what a scientist looks like, but to really, if you kind of walk by the portrait and you just assume you're looking at a male, then what happens when you realize it's a female? You see that, they're not dressed like men, they're dressed like themselves, what they would normally wear, what they're comfortable with. But I agree, it is shocking. Women are not supposed to have hair in certain places. And we actually brought in historian Kimberly Hamlin, Dr. Kimberly Hamlin. So we have a coffee table book. So you can see every single portrait that we took. Some of them didn't make it into the traveling exhibition. You can see behind the scenes. You can read stories from the subjects. And so Kimberly Hamlin was very generous and wrote an essay that's published in the book. And her research is on the representation of the bearded lady, and that she straddles these two worlds. And it is uncomfortable because she does not fit into our norm, what our expectations are. And so she has a really lovely essay on the representation of the bearded lady in society. And the title of the film was selected to kind of bring a sense of discomfort. The Bearded Lady Project. What does that, make you think about? What is that, this is not a comfortable topic, and we wanted to kind of put people on their heels a little bit.
Great, and Stacy has her hand up.
Hello, thank you for taking my comment. Wow, what a great film. I had so many feelings as I was watching it. And I was enjoying hearing what each scientist had to say about their career and their experience working with you all. And it reminded me of, well, it was relatable because of my experience in my field. I'm a clinical social worker, and I have a youthful face. And when I first started working, people didn't take me very seriously. And I remember feeling so happy when I started getting my grays, because I finally looked more serious. And so I just started sort of playing in my mind as I was watching, thinking about, well, what counts as a serious shirt? What's a serious hat? What hair is serious? It's so interesting how we get imprinted with these ideas of what's serious and what isn't, and that is just like the mask that we have to be behind. But then there was all this other theme about connection, and have some of the connections that were made during the making of this film continued as a way of just carrying forward.
Ellen, you want to take that?
Okay, so I have a screaming child in the background.
Oh, okay, I can take
I will
it.
do my best. But one of our big accomplishments was building connections and sorry, and building communities. And one of our scientists said that we had the sisterhood of the traveling beards, and I thought that was a really fun way to put it. And one of the things that also gave me a really great sense of accomplishment was at having these various the exhibitions and ceremonies with them and screenings and panel discussions, was seeing communities being created at local institutions. And so like I heard a senior scientist say to a junior scientist, well, make sure to put me down as one of your tenure writers. And so this, someone offering, for those of you who aren't in academia, when you go up for promotion and tenure, you're evaluated by external people or external to your university, but within your field. And these letters carry huge weight. And so hearing a very prominent senior scientist say to someone, put me down, I was like, yes. Okay, I no longer have a screaming child. Stacy, was there something else you wanted addressed?
No, I just mostly wanted to share that, and I enjoyed hearing some of the comments about growing in confidence, that it doesn't happen just because you get your degree doesn't mean you're confident, and it can take some trials by fire to get there. So thank you for your stories.
Stacey, if you get a chance, I really recommend watching the longer one, because it does go deeper into that. I think especially because, with women, there's that fine balance of looking professional and then looking, not professional, and, are heels professional if you don't wear heels, or, it's like just a mental minefield nightmare. And that night that I, met with Ellen and was so discouraged, film production is like field work. It's grueling. You're on your feet all day. It's not something you dress up for. And I just, I always wear a baseball hat. It keeps my hair out of my, eyes. And I had gotten so many comments of just, I bet you clean up good. You know, I bet that there's something better under what you show up to work wearing. And it just, you know, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. Is that something that's a fireable offense? No, but it doesn't make me feel included, and it's not going to be someone who's going to bring me up as a mentor. So, you know, that's the reality of the situation. I did notice Alan had a question. And so the question is, what have been the reactions from the paleontologists who happen to be men? And overall, I think it's been, you know, pretty good. We haven't, you know, I'll let Ellen kind of share her experience. I think one of the most poignant, you know, moments was, you know, in general, I think a lot of them were confused as to why we were doing this. Because as, you know, one of the subjects said in the film, she said, you know, everybody was saying, well, why are you doing this? This is unnecessary. And so one of our very early supporters, Dr. Paul Harnick, you know, he was always supportive of this. And he was, you know, like before we had any portraits, before we had a film, he was like, I support this. I think this is great. And then he was at that first exhibition and he needed to leave and take a moment to himself because he was so distraught by how many women he recognized who felt the need to participate in this. Because for him, it's like, you know, generally, okay, this is an issue. Of course, I support women in science. But he didn't realize that there would be so many people who felt that way that he knew personally, and he didn't realize that this was a challenge for them. And so that was a very honest and humble reaction to it. And I'm really glad that he shared that with us. Ellen, you want to share?
Yeah, and building off of that, so as we've done these screenings and panels and discussions at other institutions, and so for the panels we have me and Lexi, and then women who are scientists or scientists who are women, whichever way you want to say that, from that local institution. And over again, I've seen the shock of, you know, you hear about these things happening and it's like, oh, that doesn't happen at my institution, that happens somewhere else. And then here's someone at your institution saying, here are the things that have happened to me, here are things that have happened to me here. And that Paul is not the only one who's had that kind of reaction. Yeah, Alan.
I have a comment and then one of my standard questions I'll give to both of you. My comment is kind of very telling, the comment from the paleontologist that was in Australia when she was younger. Just male and society in general. I mean, yes, within this film you're talking about paleontologists, but she's just talking about a woman in a male society in general, and just the issues there, and who knows how much that has changed either. And then my standard question that I've asked on a lot of these Thursdays. So Ellen and Lexi, how did you get into being a paleontologist? Like what and when in your life did you first really want to do that? And same with you, Lexi, into filmmaking. Yeah.
Well, so I grew up in Chicago, and I didn't have a lot of experience in the outdoors, but I had this idea that it would be really fun, and that was something that I wanted to do. And so as a kid, we learned about dinosaurs in school. I went to the Field Museum. I watched PBS and Nova shows of the dinosaur expeditions, and so that, you know, it was the childhood dream. And then actually I got to college and I realized I didn't really like biology. I liked geology better. And so then I waved goodbye to dinosaurs and I got into fossil plants instead because I got interested in how has climate changed through time? How does that affect the primary producers, which then affects everything that depends on them. Lexi, on to you.
I did not want to be a director until after my master's degree. I was predominantly in theater. I grew up in a very artistic household. So I was either going to go into theater or marine biology. And my art mom said, well, you'll have to wait till grad school to do marine biology, but you can do theater now. So you don't get many stories of parents convincing their children to go the arts route instead of the science route. So I went the arts route. I went to University of Toronto. And, you know, the typical theater route is to go into acting, and especially for women, they're not offered the leadership role of director a lot. It's, you know, not really encouraged. There's not a lot of examples. And then it was when I was doing my master's, you know, after, you know, trying acting, you know, you realize that you have no control as an actor. You always have somebody telling you what to do. You don't have any power or agency overall. And I found that really frustrating because in school, I loved theater for the community aspect of it, this ephemeral experience. You're all working together to kind of achieve this one thing that can happen. You know, yes, you'll do it on repeat, but every night is different. And so as I got older, you know, I didn't love the people who were directing me, and I didn't enjoy the experience, and I found it really frustrating. And it was in my master's degree where I went into theater theory and directing that I really realized, well, if I'm the director, I get to decide how this production is run, how people are going to act, and I can establish that level of respect from the get-go. But there's no theater really available. And so I did a quick pivot. I went into an intensive film production program to see if my skills would translate. And I couldn't get hired in acting or directing, but I immediately got hired on the film set. And I just worked my way up to a point where, you know, the next level wasn't being made available to me. So I just decided to make my own production. So I started my own production company. And oftentimes you'll notice that female directors will lean towards nonfiction rather than fiction. And with nonfiction, you're not as in control. You have to allow the story, you know, you can come up with a concept, but if you don't document it, it doesn't exist. And so it's a constant, very natural reviewing of the story. So you have your concept, you film your concept, and then, you know, as if you're fishing, you reel everything in, and then you actually see what you've caught. And then you tell the story 3 times, and the 3rd time is editing it together. And so it has, you know, less of an ego attached to it because you can't do the story that you perfectly envision because you're dealing with real people and real lives. And I've really loved going that route, and I find it fascinating and interesting. And that's where I'm at today.
Well, thank you both. I meant to add that I worked before I retired. I was 40 years. I worked in early childhood education. So I worked in a field that was 95+% women all the time. So
right on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alan. We have any other questions or comments from the field? Oh, Calvin, go ahead.
Hi, thank you both so much for sharing your film and for coming on today. And thanks, Bronwyn, for all the work that you do, getting us these great presenters. I really loved the film as a female assigned person and someone that moves through the world as a woman. This really resonated with me. And then there's another part of my identity as somebody who's non-binary where I felt real anxious multiple times. And I'm just wondering if you all got a chance to consult with any trans or non-binary people during this project, because there were certain times the idea of female bodied and 2 genders and secondary sex characteristics defining a gender or what a man looks like or how a man dresses, given also the narrative out there in society right now. My guess is that you don't want to be aligned with some of the narratives that are out there. So I'm just kind of trying to reconcile both parts of my identity.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Calvin. I think, so Ellen kind of introduced this. This is a film that started filming in 2014. So it's dated. And, you know, I think, so we have a coffee table book that we've kind of expanded on this discussion. And I think it's really like, I think it should be dated. I don't think that we should be having the same conversation over and over again. So when we started, it was very much, all the promotional material was very, male centered. And so our argument was, the overall argument is everyone should be able to be a scientist. It doesn't matter. But it is a dated argument, and we are out, of the current conversation, which I think is great. So I completely agree with you. And we had these early conversations. So in the exhibition, we photographed Dr. Sarah Pruce from Smith College. And Smith College is an all-female college in Massachusetts. And it has a lot of trans, non-binary students. And so this faculty member was not comfortable wearing a beard, but she wanted to support the project. And so we said, please, however you want to present yourself. And she said, I want to stand as myself without a beard. And so we kind of ended the traveling exhibition with her portrait of, this is the end goal of whoever you are, however you want to show up and be, should be celebrated, based on your contributions. Ellen, do you have anything to?
No, I was just gonna share. I have here Sarah's portrait and then a quote. She wrote an essay in the book expressing this. So I'll just put that up for folks to read.
I can read it out loud too if it's too small. So Sarah said, teaching at Smith College has forever changed me. Before my arrival, I had never taught a transgender student, nor had I ever been in the field with a group that included non-binary students, or heard their stories, or understood their journeys. Now, as I was faced with putting on the beard, I felt again as if I was being asked to support the notion of a world in which there are only men and women scientists. And I couldn't help but feel like there were entire groups of my students being left out of this conversation.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that, because I was nervous to ask the question because I just feel like women are policed constantly, no matter what we do. We could, you know what I mean? And so I don't want to bring down women, but I'm also like, how can we be more inclusive? So I really appreciate your thoughtful answer. Thank you.
Thank you for asking that. I think that it's really important because, I mean, that's the goal, is that, if we're looking for acceptance, we can't only say, well, this group only should get acceptance, right? And what we're having right now is we're taking away rights. And the thing is that if you don't give rights to other individuals, guess what? You can't guarantee your own rights. So where does the line stop? So we should be celebrating, we should be, supporting each other. And I know Ellen and I are fully in support of inclusivity at every level. And it's not just for this specific group.
And we
Thank
are
you for that.
also for learning from others and sharing experiences. And I mean, I have to admit, with the sheltered, or not sheltered isn't the right word, but just with the upbringing that I had, when we started this project, I couldn't have defined gender for you, or this was all out of my wheelhouse. And so I've really been learning and really feel grateful to be able to have these sorts of conversations with folks.
And I guess you bring up a good point that this film was made and the project started in 2014, and things have changed since then, and things continue to change. How are you looking back on this project in any form or fashion, or kind of given the new realities of today and the changes that are occurring as we speak?
Well, I think that's the challenge with creating anything and putting it out there, is that it'll always have a timestamp. And I think that if I were to redo it today, I think I would still keep the beard, because it is such an overused reference to the colonial past of paleontology. I mean, the project was camp. We're not taking, this the beard must match the hair and they have to like own the beard, right? It is very much a prop and a costume. But that said, I think that I would include the non-binary conversation and include scientists, you know, who are transgendered, because they do exist. So I think that it would broaden in terms of who we brought in, because back then we were reaching out to female identified scientists. Ellen, do you have anything?
Yeah, so I think like Lexi said, I think that there would be some things that I would want to change if we were doing it today. I think I have to be very grateful that we did it 10 years ago, because I would lose my job if I made this today. It is now illegal at the University of Wyoming for us to do things like this. It is illegal for me to have the Girl Scouts in my lab. We are the front line. Yes, the state legislature passed a bill that said for all state agencies, and University of Wyoming is obviously a state agency, we are prohibited from any activities that exclude on the basis of race or sex. So this would be illegal.
Could you explain how the Girl Scouts are illegal?
Because they're exclusive. As far as I know, I don't believe boys are allowed to be Girl Scouts.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's very interesting. I also echoed did you know that the scientist who said, "Can I bring my own beard because I used it when in the 1970s in Australia"? Was that even on your radar? Did that shock you?
She did not want to be a part. So this was, I think, our second shoot overall. So, you know, before you have anything, we're like, hey, would you, you know, wear a beard for us? It was just we didn't know how many people we would get. And Dr. Cindy Louie at UC Berkeley recruited over 50 female faculty members and students. And we just had to put in this huge beard order, and it was, you know, amazing and chaotic. And so she said, you know, Dr. Carol Hickman is an emeritus scholar. She's incredible. You really should interview her. And Dr. Hickman refused to do anything that associated with female anything, because she felt that that shouldn't exist, because it kind of, you know, like, why don't you just reach out to me as a scientist? Why does female have to, you know, be the first part of that? And she kept hearing stories of people's interviews, and finally was like, hey, I'd be okay with an interview. So we squeezed her in at the last minute. We're kind of rushing around. And then she just asked offhand if she could bring her own mustache. And we said, sure, no problem. And it wasn't until we sat down for her interview that she said, this was the mustache that I wore in the field. And we had no expectation. It blew us away, and it completely almost validated what we were doing, because you know, as Ellen said in the film, you know, what if I just put a beard on my face? Because that seems to be the one thing missing from me achieving success and acceptance. And that seems like an easy fix. And the fact that it was actually a tool to kind of blend in was heartbreaking and bizarrely reassuring.
Yeah, that was the most shocking part of the film for me. It was a wow moment, for sure. Any other questions or comments for Ellen or Lexi? All right. Well, I'm so glad that you are able to make this film. It's important work. For sure, and we all have important work to do in a variety of ways. And Ellen, I'd love to have you back to talk about your science stuff too, as well. So that would be great. And we'll be looking forward, Lexi, to learning all about Ultimate Frisbee and I Am a Hurricane movie that will be coming out that sounds fascinating. That's what we do. We keep telling the stories here. And thank you all for joining us for Must Learn Thursday. It's a little bit of a departure today, but we're back, not back, but we're hitting crayfish of Maryland. I'm from Louisiana, so we call them crawfish. So it's crayfish of Maryland next Thursday evening. And but thank you all. Stay well, stay curious, stay outside, and we'll see you soon. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ellen and Lexi. Thank you very much. It was great.